It has been quite a few months since my last film review, being of course Masaki Kobayashi's 1962 masterpiece, Harakiri, which I believe to be the greatest samurai film of all time. Yet I think it would be interesting now to move forward several years and visit another very similar film from that same director. Another story about injustice, tragedy, and vengeance. This film being released in 1967 and starring none other than the legendary Toshiro Mifune along with Tatsuya Nakadai once again. This film being Samurai Rebellion. In my previous review for Harakiri, one element that I did not linger on too long was that of director Masaki Kobayashi. Much of Kobayashi's films would be characteristic of his own beliefs and experiences, often carrying a heavy anti-war sentiment, something which came from Kobayashi's own pacifism. Kobayashi had grown up during the final age of Japan's imperial expansion. He had seen his nation's militarism firsthand, and he would not be able to escape it, as he would be drafted into the army in 1942, right in the midst of the Second World War. Being drafted had interrupted his own up-and-coming film career, but by the end of the war, he had been captured by Allied forces, and would remain a prisoner until being released in 1946. It was here he was able to return to his passion of filmmaking, where his experiences during the war would ultimately influence his future works. One of Kobayashi's most significant creations would be The Human Condition, a trilogy of 3 films that focus around the role of Kaji, a young and idealistic man played by Tatsuya Nakadai, who like Kobayashi himself would be thrust into the Second World War and would have to endure many hardships. These and other films Kobayashi would produce would play the unique role of being some of the first Japanese films to really take a critical examination of the nation's role during the war. And although most of his entire filmography are set in contemporary times, there are at least 3 films he would make that would be set in pre-modern Japan. One of these would be Kwaidan, a film I have also covered here on the channel. This film treads into more of the mystical realm, as it delivers 4 unique and haunting folktales. Yet the other 2 examples are ones that are much more focused on being critical of the role the samurai and their authority played in old Japan, specifically during the Edo period, under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate. His finest portrayal of this is in my opinion Harakiri. Yet he would also make a very similar and poignant film several years later, being that of Samurai Rebellion. Both Harakiri and Samurai Rebellion follow the same overall structure. An injustice is put down upon a family by their overlords. Yet, in time, they still manage to make the best of their situation and find happiness, only to later have everything come crashing down into bitter tragedy, once again caused by the samurai above them. This then leads to the main character staging a brutal protest that results in numerous lives lost as his point is made. And although both of these stories follow the same pattern, the actual story they tell is of course very different, and even the focus itself somewhat changes, as the lens with which we view these 2 tales is unique. Now, I don't want to make this entire video a lengthy comparison of the 2 films. I do want to say why I feel Harakiri does its job better, but I'll save that for later. For now, let's dive into the story and characters of Samurai Rebellion, and why it's still a good film on its own. As usual, there will be some spoilers ahead, just so you are warned. The story of Samurai Rebellion centers around the figure of Sasahara Izaburo, played by Toshiro Mifune, a somewhat high-ranking official within Aitsu domain. His life is quiet and peaceful as he carries out his routine duties, his only real passion being swordsmanship, to which he is regarded as an expert, and his only equal being his good friend, Asano Tatewaki, played by Tatsuya Nakadai. Izaburo's life gets shaken up when his lord Matsudaira Masakata orders Izaburo's son to marry Masakata's own ex-concubine, Lady Ichi, which with he already has a child. It's a disgraceful and distasteful situation, and Izaburo is quick to attempt to decline, but it is no use, and the marriage goes ahead regardless. Surprisingly though, things turn out for the better, as Lady Ichi turns out to be a perfect bride. bringing much joy and satisfaction to the family. They come to really love and cherish her. Especially Izaburo, who sees the love his son and Lady Ichi have for each other, love that has always been absent within his own marriage. Yet this period of happiness was unfortunately not to last, as soon enough tragedy would strike. The original heir to Aitsu domain would sadly die prematurely, resulting in the child that Lady Ichi formerly had with the Lord to now be the new heir apparent. This means that she has to be recalled to Lord Masakata's side so that she can effectively raise the child. Essentially, she must now be torn away from Izaburo's family. This order once again comes down hard on Izaburo's family as yet another injustice. But this time, he is done taking such orders. He and his son would ultimately decide to make a desperate stand in protest against these continued disgraces, resulting in a bloody, violent conclusion that leaves many dead and pits brother against brother and friend against friend. It's certainly an impactful story that is vividly portrayed by its stellar cast, but also by its terrific composition. This film plays out like a beautiful work of art, with fantastic cinematography and editing, as well as symbolic and well-timed music that serves to pull you in and unsettle you at all the right moments. Similar to a number of Kobayashi's other films, such as Harakiri and Kwaidan, Toru Takemitsu would return to deliver striking themes using traditional instruments that elevate every scene where they make their timely appearance. As dramatic chords ring out during tension, and the sudden arising of simple notes cause you to look closer into specific moments. All in all, the solid story, terrific cast and characters, and overall brilliant music all come together to deliver what is a truly good film. But I don't know if I would personally go so far as to say it is great, and that is because Harakiri exists. Both movies deliver significant subject matter, as they are both part of the subgenre of Japanese period dramas that we can call anti-samurai films. They portray most samurai as cruel and oppressive overlords, like many actually were, not the idealized, virtuous, and honorable figures that have become so romanticized. If anything, good and honorable figures were the exception and not the norm. And while Harakiri portrays injustice from the point of view of how it would impact a down-on-his-luck Ronin and his family, who not only originally became Ronin due to an injustice, but would also go on to suffer further torment, here in Samurai Rebellion, we see injustice within the system itself, impacting actual employed and dutiful samurai in negative ways. This just goes to show that it does not really matter where you ranked in the overall hierarchy. Anyone could be a victim to the oppressive regime of the Edo period. And what these films both do terrifically is work in tandem beside each other to portray two separate roles within pre-modern Japan that were both equally hit by the tyranny of those above. And I am glad that Kobayashi took the time to craft these two films, because they echo his own beliefs in a truly poignant way, while also doing the great job of illustrating that samurai, particularly those in power, who are so often held in such high regard, not only in Japan but also abroad, were likely quite awful people in many instances. Maybe not seen as such at the time, but definitely through a modern lens in looking back in retrospect. And while Samurai Rebellion's story does a terrific job at showcasing this, it is nowhere near as gut-wrenching as Harakiri. The drama and tension of Harakiri far outweigh that of the drama and tension in Samurai Rebellion, and this is obviously because of several factors: who is being affected and how they are being affected. Harakiri's story displays a samurai becoming a Ronin, only to then slowly lose everything that he holds dear, as everyone he loves dies tragically, and in one case, horrifically, prompting his own motivation to seek revenge. Not to kill those responsible, but to tear down the honor and integrity of the very institution that caused such pain. This is slightly different than the story in Samurai Rebellion, which sees the main injustice being the Lord forcing a marriage upon an unwilling family, only to later then revoke that initial order after love bloomed anyway. This, of course, results in a violent protest, but it never feels like it carries the same weight. But what I think is the most interesting comparison to make is when we compare the characters of Tsugumo Hanshiro in Harakiri to Sasahara Izaburo in Samurai Rebellion. I strongly believe that these two characters are almost identical in terms of their own morals and philosophical beliefs, and that if their roles were reversed, they both may have taken roughly the same exact actions, with perhaps the only real difference being ultimately their endgame. I could go further into analyzing the mindsets of each of these characters even more, using perhaps the fact that these two films are set historically almost 100 years apart from one another, but I feel like that might be reading a bit too much into it. What I can say though regarding this film's historical accuracy is that, like Harakiri, Samurai Rebellion sets itself up nicely within real history, using the real Aitsu domain and real historical daimyo of Matsudaira Masakata. But that is really where the actual historical connections come to an end, as the story itself I believe is historical fiction. I know that the overall plot is one taken from a short story, much like how Harakiri is based on another story as well. I find it interesting how Kobayashi was able to set these stories up then build larger films out of them, connecting them to the overall theme of being anti-samurai and critical of oppressive regimes. And as you may already know, taking short stories and turning them into wider film depictions is something he would do frequently, as Kwaidan is another shining example of this, taking not one, but 4 separate stories. Finding inspiration in such places I think works extremely well, and is one of the many reasons why I feel his period dramas all succeed as fascinating works of art. And that is where I want to leave it. So, what rating would I ultimately give Samurai Rebellion? In the end, I would give Samurai Rebellion 3.5 stars out of 4. It excels with nearly every element, but I think is only pulled back by the more tame depiction of injustice, especially when you are comparing it to the masterpiece that is Kobayashi's earlier work, Harakiri. But that is just my opinion, and I'd love to hear yours. What are your thoughts on Samurai Rebellion? Have you seen it? And if so, how do you think it compares to other samurai and anti-samurai films? Let me know in the comments below. And with that said, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell if you enjoyed this video and found it to be most interesting.